Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. DJ at ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Thank you, Z-Man. Welcome to The Soul of the Everyman. And we are going to be speaking of...
one of our favorite topics.
Yes. Death.
Death! Never go up against the Sicilian.
Oh, dear.
When death is
on the line. You have to say it with a lisp.
Death! Death is on the line.
That's right.
And if anyone can call in before the end of the show and tell us what movie that's from...
Oh, stop.
We will give you something. We'll figure it out. So you don't have to call in. You could email Scott, and I'll give you to the end of the show, and we'll give you something. We'll find something to give you. Anyway, yes, death is on the line.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Well, and it's not exactly death. It's a beautiful Tole quote. Do you want to do the quote?
Oh, sure, I can do that.
Although death is our favorite topic.
All right. The secret of life is to die before you die and find that there is no death. Tole.
A typical sort of inside-out Tole, but to jump right into it, what he's really talking about is, there's two or three things here. The central conundrum, die before you die, kind of catches your mind, if you will. And it does exactly that, right? It catches the mind. The mind goes, what do you mean? Die before you die. Doesn't make any sense. What does it mean? It doesn't make any sense.
What do you mean?
But the secret of life is what I think gets people going on this quote, because everyone's looking, for the secret of life. And as we all know, it's 42. But and if you can, never mind. So the secret of life is to die before you die, and then and people go, well, what do you mean? I mean, how can that be the secret of life? It doesn't make sense. And find that there is no death. And so right away, this is off-putting to the mind and to the ego, and I think intentionally so. Tole is trying to confuse you like a Zen koan does. What's the sound of one hand clapping? To, in essence, get the mind off base. It's trying to make the mind kind of go off and maybe shut down for a second or two and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And so it does not compute. So
right. So it's obviously a few meanings in die before you die. What is the die he's talking about?
Exactly. And it's not, it's not some sort of pun either. He literally means the death he's talking about here is the death of the mind or of the ego, and potentially of the body even. But let's leave the body out of it. Well,
before you die, which is dying of the body.
And certainly that's the way the mind is wanting to consider this. When it sees the word die, when the ego sees the word die, it immediately thinks of death, and I believe it for most people it evokes negative emotions, fear, or anxiety in any case, and potentially sadness.
Well, bodily death is something that very few people experience and then are able to talk about it.
But it's not zero.
No,
not zero. There are some.
There are some
who get to go and come back.
Yeah, have gone through it and have returned to tell people about their experience.
And interestingly enough, almost, I wouldn't say every one of them, but most of them come back with no fear of death.
Right. I don't know of any story where they have come back and they're afraid of death. because they've gone through it and they're like, I want to go back there. It was better.
Or the general sentiment is, that wasn't so bad. What was it? But it was, what was I worried about? It was not a big deal. And I think the main, if we just digress for a moment about death, the main driver of death is the fear of the main driver of the fear of death is the fear of the unknown. You just don't know.
Well,
and of course the experience may be painful or whatever, but yes.
The unknown in general is something that we've trained ourselves to be cautious of and sometimes fearful of.
Oh yeah, I'd say almost always fearful of.
So I wonder sometimes if it can be trained the other way, where the unknown is just the unknown and there's no fear injected into it. You are aware, cautious maybe, depending on the situation, but not fearful.
I'm sure. I'm not just sure. I would say that a large portion of what Tolle is trying to tell people is that fear, and we see this in other writings, but that fear takes you out of the moment of now. So do other things, but fear is a big one for many people. Anxiety, fear. It was his big thing, right? When he was in the unconscious state, he spent much of his time dwelling in either the injustices of the past or the anxiety about his situation, about the future. What's going to happen to me? How is this going to do? And it made him, as it makes everyone, miserable. It induced suffering. And as he said, he would be there, lying in bed, covers snuggled up, and completely nothing, absolutely nothing threatening. The most peaceful time of the day, and lying awake, in essence, in abject suffering, and anticipating this or thinking about what had happened, and just not in the moment of now, which the moment of now is a perfectly peaceful, beautiful moment.
Well, just lost in the story and the worry, the projection of what could be. And it is something that we as human beings have been given the ability to do, to remember what had happened before and learn from it and try to project forward to solve whatever the problem may be. But when it's overused, that's when it becomes something that eats you alive.
Pathological.
Yeah, you wind up just sitting and stewing in this. What if, if we. And I've said this before, it would be lovely to be able to discipline your mind to just consider all the facts that you've got, come to your conclusion, and then that's it. Don't pick it up again unless there's something new to add to the considerations. But that's not what we do. We believe that somehow if we consider it one more time, doing it the exact same way, that somehow we're going to come up with a whole different answer.
And if you ask me, that's learned, that's taught.
Yes, that's been reinforced. Let's do it again. Well, as a friend of mine had always said, worrying is a sign of affection.
People see that.
Yeah.
And I want to go back just for a moment to death. Not only is it, the fact that you say we fear what the unknown, but I think people also fear the anticipation of loss. Okay, the anticipation of sadness. If someone close to you passes away, you feel desperately hurt. You feel wounded. You feel lost. You can feel all kinds of grief, and you feel parted from them, and you feel as though they've that their relationship with you is gone now. And so all of this all of this negative emotion also adds into the fear. You fear the loss. You anticipate the pain of loss. You anticipate the sadness that will occur. And this all balls up into, in some ways, a fixation. In other ways, Margaret, sort of people push it away. If any thought of death is to be buried, eschewed, not shunned. That's the best word, is shunned. And those who speak of it,
how could you think of that?
How can you
What's
bring
wrong
this up?
with you?
What's wrong with you? Even those who deal in, people who throughout the ages, whose job it was to either work with the bodies of the dead or in some way be involved with death. We're often the unclean, the untouchables, or certainly, it would be almost like not polite society. You're an undertaker. Oh, we don't want to talk to you. There's a certain contagion associated with death, and because there's the corruption of the physical. So all these things kind of ball themselves up, and people fixate. Or they shun, but even shunning is a type of fixation because you are no longer in control of yourself. If something makes you recoil, it's making you do this.
Disgust.
So this sort of back to this cone of Tolle's, the secret of life. So everyone, if you start your phrase with the secret of life, people prick up their ears. Oh gosh,
there's a secret.
I'm going to get the secret of life. Let me take out my notebook so I can write this down. It's going to be great. So we're going to write down about the secret of life. And the secret of life is to die before you die. And right there, people they're confused. Okay, the mind is confused. It's baffled. What do you mean die before you die? The emotions, the ego, or either it's either fear or shunning it, or just so it's all roiled up. And the ego, as we all are familiar with, and as Madison Avenue will tell you, the ego thinks it's going to live unchanged forever. It's going to be forever youthful, forever strong, forever sexually potent, all the things that, Madison Avenue will tell you that if you use this cream and do this ointment and do this other thing and these exercises and these vitamins and don't eat anything smarter than a snail, you're good, There are some pretty smart snails out there, let me tell you. I've seen some darters that could, run rings around things. But if you just stick to these tenets, they're almost like, some sort of cantrip or some sort of spell that suddenly your ego's bought into this, well, I'm going to live forever. I'm going to always be forever.
All I have to do is.
Exactly.
And then you sit there and you're like, okay, so the image, and that's what I find fascinating. Your self-image never changes. How many times have you heard people say, I still think that I'm like 20 years old, and my body is decades past that, but I still think internally I'm 20.
Right. And what they mean is exactly that, the mental image of who they are, and isn't that correct in one regard? Because that is who you are, not the 18-year-old you, but there is an eternal part of you which does not age. It's timeless.
And it's interesting because when you try to reason it, that's when you begin putting all this fluff on that eternal image. And at that moment, the identification with the physical body happens, as opposed to the identification with that spark that's in you that is eternal. And I think that's an interesting shift of consciousness or viewpoint, believing that, who I am is eternally young. And that's true. Your spirit is timeless.
Ageless.
But part of you, and then you have to catch yourself doing this, part of you thinks it's this physical form. It's got to be the image I see in the mirror.
Right.
And that's where that disconnect begins to happen, where you're not embracing that eternal part, but you begin to embrace the physical and basically want the physical body to be eternal.
Emulate the eternal.
Mm-hmm. And when that doesn't happen,
right.
When that doesn't happen, that's when people start going into, oh no, I've got to do something about this.
Well, that's the root of these sort of, let's say, eternal life fantasies. Either I, take this pill or this treatment, or there's so many science fiction stories written about eternal youth, or in fact, there's many stories written about eternal protagonists. Tolkien had the elves, whatever, and there's always seen as very wise or very desirable lives to live. And yet there's other stories, just to digress again for a minute in stories, there's other stories which in essence say that part of our humanity is that we are ephemeral. And understanding that the ephemeral nature of human beings is why we have the need to express ourselves into the eternal, or why we in essence embrace the future, the children, throw something into the void that is speaks of the eternal spark, without the pressure of an ephemeral life.
Right.
These things become less important.
Right.
Now that's not where we want to go here, because Tully would say that's a step in the right direction. It's a sort of a half step, but what he's putting in this phrase is very similar, and we put this into the onto the website. It's very similar in many ways to the samurai bushido. And if you're at all familiar with the bushido, it's also known as the way of the samurai. I think people have heard that. There's a central tenet there, and it's expressed in the best way, is that if you're able to live as though your body were already dead, you realize incredible freedom, and you can act in the moment of now. It's what the samurai were kind of good at, was they would fight with incredible focus, with diamond vision precision, because they would act not thinking, well, if I do this wrong, somebody's going to cut me, or somebody's going to be able to hurt me, or I'm going to do this, but that the perfection of the motion, the focus on the now, was most important, and that your body, your physical presence, whether your physical existence, not your presence, but your physical existence, shouldn't get in the way of that. Anticipation of the future, anticipation of pain, worry about what happened, none of that. Put all that to the side. Live as though you're already dead. In other words, don't consider this life. And Tully says the same. The secret to life is to die. To die to what? Well, to die to the mind. To die to this idea of an ego, of this eternal youthful body. To die to the who you are. I'm this professor, I'm that accountant, or I'm this. All these ego fantasies.
It's grasping concepts, believing that these concepts are who you are. It's kind of like grabbing a piece of clothing and putting it on and believing, well, okay, I'm this jacket. That's who I am. I'm the jacket. Like, no. You are adorning.
Isn't there the phrase of the clothes wearing you versus the other way around?
Yes, that's when you want to put a mask on. That's when the clothes are wearing you. But you can see, especially in the Bushido, they would take the body and train it so that its body movement is pure memory. And they would exercise rigorously, repeatedly, to get the movements down, and they're automatic. And then they would begin to expand their perceptions of what is going around them. You know, they are, what is that called? The where your intelligence is able to perceive what's going on around you spatially, in the moment.
I'm not sure what you mean.
It will come to me.
I mean, I know perception, but that's not probably what you mean. That's spatial awareness, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Situational awareness.
Oh, situation. Yes. Okay. Situational awareness. Yep.
All right. So, being able to read positionings, if, say, you're in a situation where you may be pinned down, where possibly could the sniper be? It's just situational awareness, things happening all around you. And you create a field around you that just little promptings, and the body already knows what it needs to do. Athletes in general, they have that awareness wherever the field happens to be that they're playing on. They expand their awareness to that field.
Exactly. You can see it in the best of them that they're moving. When they're moving in their athletic endeavor, whatever it is, they call it being in the zone, quote unquote. It's almost as though the action and the reaction, so the perception and the reaction, are as one. It becomes not something that, oh well, the ball comes and I go to it. No, it's like I'm moving as the ball is moving, and we're in synchrony, we're in harmony, we're in balance, and it becomes it becomes something you could do with your eyes closed. I think there's the Zen practice of, in essence, holding the bow with the arrow knocked, and initially they just hold a bow, like you're holding a bow, right? You don't even get a string; you just get the bow, and then you graduate, you go all the way up and get a string, and you're holding the bow and the string, no arrow yet. And you draw the bow and you just hold it there, hours on end. You close your eyes and you're just holding the bow and the arrow and the string, and there's no arrow. Eventually you get an arrow. But the point of it is that the awareness, the field of awareness of the master becomes such that when the arrow needs to fly, you let it go. You're not shooting an arrow anymore. You're in that moment of now where the arrow had to go, and where you are no more than just one part of the now, which in that exact instant, you're doing exactly what the universe needs. You are part of the all, and the all says now, and you release, and the arrow flies, and it strikes the target, but none of it matters. You're not trying to hit the target. The arrow doesn't matter. The strain on your arms, none of it matters. You've died to all that. Your death is to the perception, to the ego, to the I'm shooting something, to I'm going to make the target, to I'm going to, I'm the arrow, I'm the archer, I'm this, I'm that. You're none of those things. You're none of those things. You are everything and you are nothing. People say you have to become completely selfless. Yes, you give death to yourself, to your ego, and you become one with the moment of now. And then the arrow flies because it had to, and you released because you had to, and there's no you.
Yes.
And that exercise, when you finally realize it, when you're at that level, you're not an archer. There's no arrow, there's no bow, there's nothing. There's just the eternal moment of you, the presence, the whole universe around you, of which you're with and of and in, and it's within you. And the arrow flies because the arrow had to fly. That's all. And it's no more a miracle than the rest of the universe is, which is a miracle, but it's not a greater miracle. It's not being worked.
Yes. And in that moment, everything is integrated. Nothing is more in charge than something else. You are completely present on all levels, physical, mental, emotional. So it's a good thing to be able to integrate to that point, because that's where you have pure focus. You are only on one task, and it's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned focus, because part of the initial training is focus. But I think the end of it is no longer about focus. It's about release. Or it's about the focus which is not focused by intention. It's like shooting an arrow, but there's no intention. There's not, I'm going to shoot it now, and now I let it go, and now there it goes, and now it's on its way, and blah, blah, blah.
What you mean is a personal intention.
Exactly.
Okay, because there is a focus. Focus requires that, if there's another word for intention, but that focus is absolutely needed.
It's true, because the word intention has a personal connotation to it. I, and the personal part of it comes in with the little I, as Tolle says, the I that is going to pick up the arrow, the I that's going to fit it to the string, da 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 da, and I'm going to shoot this thing. All those I's are gone, but yet the intention, the purity of the moment of now, which has in and of itself a attention and an intention. There's a perception and an action, and you are part of both. You're where the moment of now happens.
Well, in that physical, when you're training your body physically to do it automatically, there's a feedback loop that hits in a whole different spot than the mental.
Yes.
You know how it is when something's falling and you automatically, your hand just goes out and grabs it? You didn't think about it.
No.
And that's the idea, to be able to automatically go into where you need to be right at that given moment. If you think about it, that's when the hesitation, half-second hesitation happens and you miss it.
Exactly. That's what the Bushido teaches as well.
Yes.
That the hesitation of ego will guarantee your failure.
Yes. It's
very much like a Greek play. In essence, what you anticipate is what occurs. If you don't
focus, your focus. This is part of the intention. You've broken intention.
Yes. Yes. And when you live as though you're already dead, you no longer need ego. The ego needs you, but the ego wants to have the intention that I am going to do this, and there might be this, and this little ego hesitation as it plays through its game, its story, is where you lose the moment of now. The pure intention, which is intention, is perception, intention, action, all in one, seamlessly, is why the athlete can move and perform at that beautifully conscious level, at that intention level, and it looks miraculous. Some of the things gymnasts do look beyond. They look preternatural. They're not, but they're in the moment of now. They're entirely.
Well, they have to be.
They
have to be focused on it, because if they hesitate, you can wind up really hurting yourself.
Right, and that's exactly it. When the ego interjects, that's when you get the loss of the moment. You're no longer in the now, and you're no longer able to execute at that level. And and in this moment of now, we're going to go back to the studio and take a little break. And on the other side, we're going to talk more about death.
Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. We don't care what your real name is, we're just glad that you're listening. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lons.
Hey, thank you, Scott. We talk about a lot of things during the breaks, and that was one of them. That we don't care what people's names are. But tonight we are talking about death, and one might say that in death, the name doesn't matter, and the name is interesting, Margaret. Just to digress for a minute about names, because people get hung up on names. Your name, which seems rather essential to have one, is in many ways an ego construct. Certainly your name is a way of talking to you, and without a name it's difficult to get someone's attention, perhaps. But to get hung up on a name, or maybe better, to get hung up on a title or on a particular job that you do, is a beautiful conceit in one way that the ego loves to latch onto. And just to go back to where we started here, the quote from Tolle, which is The Secret of Life, if you take out the middle part, which I think was really designed to silence the mind, die before you die, it just gives the mind something to puzzle over. The secret of life is that there is no death. And that is the real core, even though it's on both sides, it's on the front and on the back of this quote. The core of the quote is that the secret of life is that there is no death, no real death, the actual consciousness that is you, the spark of spirit, the emanation of source, the eternal you, the one that Margaret mentioned in the last half hour, that you always think of yourself as being 18, or in some ways just as being you. You're just you. You're you. And if you think back, even to when you were a child, the very moment that you were aware of yourself, you haven't changed. Your abilities change, your knowledge change, your body changes, you acquire various physical characteristics, you get prettier, you get uglier, you get older, you get fatter, all these things happen, more experience, whatever. But the essential being, the actual you, of which all your relationships are part of. In other words, when you relate to another, the part that makes that relationship work is the being state that you find, the resonance, your being resonates with their being. Your presence is, you're in the other's presence. That you, within which the universe exists, not the other way around. You don't exist within a universe. You exist within something, a reality, an isness of now you exist in. And yet all the perception of that universe is within your consciousness. Your consciousness within the universe, the isness of now, perceives what we all perceive. Some less, some more, to one degree or another, but we perceive through our physicality, through our mentality, through our incarnation, where we are.
Are you referencing the physical feedback?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about consciousness participating in a larger consciousness?
Well, both, sort of. But I mean,
you are?
Because I think that what I'm trying to say is that the consciousness that is you, within it, all perception resides. The incarnation also resides within it. Consciousness holds all. The ego, the mentality, the emotions, the energies, all within consciousness. The secret of life is that never dies. That part of you is always you.
So what you're saying is what you're perceiving is all encompassed in the consciousness state?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
That no perception escapes consciousness. Consciousness is the field within which all perception resides.
Okay, because it was a little
I was going out there.
Yeah, no.
Sometimes. It's just...
I know.
It's not easy being me, or being around me. Anyway, and there is no death, because death is a construct. Death, the physical death of your body, of your form, to use a Tolle term, is written in the incarnation itself. It is not eternal. It is an incarnation. It is form which by its very nature wears away, which disappears. But as Tolle also says, the consciousness does not. The consciousness does not wear away. The consciousness does not disappear. Your emanation of source is from source. And source is eternal, as are you. And that's the part of you that is in presence with the other, that where relationships actually happen, presence to presence, where you recognize the humanity and the uniqueness of the other, whomever the other may be, is through that. What we do here, the ways we interact, all the things that are part of the isness of now are infinitely variable. But the consciousness and the recognition of another's consciousness, in true awareness, supersedes all of that, or encompasses, as Margaret just says, encompasses all of that. If you come to that awareness, Margaret, I think where you are is that the rest of form, the rest of consciousness of the universe around you, you come to the awareness. You can be in that moment of now where the arrow has to fly. It doesn't matter anymore. You're not trying to do it anymore. It's just you're in the moment where it happens.
Participating in that awareness, and Tolle calls it being in the now.
The now.
Okay. Without distraction, maybe that's the best way to put it. There's no thing that needs your attention. You should look at this, or you pay attention to that, or you have to figure this out. It's like, no. All of that has been already considered. And the execution of whatever is required in the moment is the only thing that you're aware of. Nothing else impinges on your consciousness in that it's a diamond focus, or rather a laser-like focus. And all that matters is participation in that moment. And when I say participation, it's not, I'm thinking, and this is the plan, and we've got the check-off list of, okay, well, he turns left, I turn right.
Right.
No. This is when you die, if you're doing Bushido. It's the awareness of being in that moment. All you know is avoid, block, response. It has been a repetition by the body, and it knows it automatically. It's very well aware of its limitations, its boundaries, and that's what I find most people do not have. They are not aware of their boundary limits physically, which is an indicator to me that they're not aware of their boundary limits mentally or emotionally. And always cautious at that point, because it means that they're going to hit a wall and drop, and they won't even know what hit them.
Well, and you're living in that sense, not in the moment of now. If you're unaware, your form, Margaret, is part of the moment of now. Being aware out to the precision of perception, where your consciousness is in the moment of now, is that zone. You know, it's the Bushido. You're no longer considering what will happen, what happened a moment ago. I do this, they go left, you go right, as you just said. None of that matters. Your actions and your perceptions are in the moment of now, which means that you might as well, your ego is not saying now cut here, now do that, now move this way, now. None of that. You're in the moment where all that happens without anything other than your awareness. And your awareness is not volition. It's not ego intention. It's the thing that must be now. And you're on that you're on that cutting edge of where now is. And in the moment of now, Margaret, you may die. Your opponent may kill you, but it doesn't matter because you're already living as though you were already dead. So your actions they aren't considering that maybe I'll die, because that doesn't matter.
Yes, at that point, you've already died to self.
Exactly.
You're not who you think you are.
We've said that one before. You are not who you think you are.
You are a bright spark in that flow of energy that is life. And you know where you need to go and you know how to move. Putting words to it falls very short because in order to speak, you must engage that faculty of the mental. So the description falls very short from actually being in that state. You cannot talk yourself into it. You cannot.
Wait, that's so beautiful. That's a great way of putting it. You can't talk yourself into it.
No.
Because that's a great way of saying that.
Well, it's the limitations that we have in trying to discuss this, because there are discussions that can happen non-verbally, and they are much more to the point than sitting there and verbalizing continually. But to do that, you must be in presence physically to communicate that way.
Like when you're in presence with an infant, which has no words, but yet there's a perfect communication going on there. If you're open and you're in each other's presence, and words are superfluous and get in the way, in fact.
Mm-hmm. And you realize at that point that you're more than what you think. But that thinking habit is the first thing people grab.
Yeah.
They engage, they grasp, believing that this is the only way I can understand what's going on, and it is not.
I mean, I'm still back to that phrase, you can't talk yourself into the moment of now, and yet people want the 7 steps to enlightenment, and they want, everything I have to do to become, to gain nirvana, and it has to be an arduous, long, totally talks about this, it has to be an arduous, long, terrible, long journey through the waste, and, striving and struggling and struggling, and yet you see in true enlightenment that it's no more than a step. It's just the realization, and you're there.
Well, it is an absolute release of everything you think you know. The description, if you think of all this in terms of process, the description, I remember this image being shown, is that your reality is like a flow of life. So imagine it as a waterfall, and you're there, and the whole waterfall is there for you to be experienced. But when you try to think about it and mental it, it's like your flow is more akin to a straw. The straw will never understand that wholeness of flow. It can't contain it. It is swept away. But people insist that they've got to experience this water through this straw.
Right. And they want to conceive of somehow the waterfall fitting in the straw.
Well, they're saying, oh, it'll take time, I know, but I will experience everything about this waterfall.
Right.
Just go a little bit at a time.
Right.
And your life is not long enough to be able to do that.
Exactly. And another way of putting it is that you're trying to see the ocean, through a hole through which one eye can peek through a very long tube and trying to see the whole ocean. Yes, if you swing it around as crazily and as fast as you can, you'll get a million little pieces, and maybe you can put them all together. And that, in essence, is people's concept of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to see the ocean, to be one with it, requires nothing. You can do it with your eyes closed. You can hold the arrow and the bow and the string and let it fly, and never have pointed it, never have aimed it, never have thought about what you're going to shoot, when you're going to shoot it, because those are all straws. They're all tiny little holes of thought where I'm going to string all this together, knit one to the next and have all the sequence of things, and then when I push A and B is going to happen, and C and then D and then E and then F and G and I, all of a sudden, bluff, there it is, I've done it. And yes, you put together a million straws and you made something happen. But the awareness, the moment of now, to use that old term, grokking, that was what it was. It was to be in the awareness of all and know that the moment that you need to do something will become apparent. It'll become more than obvious. It'll become necessary.
Yes. Yes. You will know. And just allowing yourself that kind of faith.
There's a word.
Yes. You must abide in that faith that it will come together as need be in perfect timing. If you allow yourself to expand and be in that point. As I said, you cannot talk yourself into it.
You said perfect timing. The people talk about God's timing, and people get hung up on it. Oh, God's timing. Because the mental is, it's like when the mental is, you give die before you die, the mental is like, oh, I can't do that. But in fact, the timing, who times the universe? Who's turning the crank? Well, you say there is no crank. Right. The universe has no time crank, but yet it all seems to flow and does flow without anything other than the perfect synchrony of being now.
It's there before you even were born, before you had your first thought. Most people believe that their universe starts the minute they open their eyes. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. But that's how they treat their day. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. The acknowledgement of something so vast that is out there, has been out there, and will be out there once your timeline has stopped. It's not something to be considered. And in many ways, when you embrace that is the depth that can happen, because you've released this idea that I know when things should begin and I know when it ends. Right. You actually know nothing.
The interesting thing about that is the words that Margaret just used, I believe, are the words of the ego. That the ego believes the universe starts when its eyes open. That the ego treats its day that way. But in presence, in consciousness, in awareness, in the eternal now, time doesn't matter. What the perception of the universe is within the consciousness. The ego's timing of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it is all conceit. It's all about, the little I.
Well, little I am controlling it. Yeah. I only have to organize it,
right, and
it'll go the way I want it to.
And even the quote-unquote vastness of the universe, if it thinks about it at all, it thinks about it in the sense, in the context of I. I'm living in the universe. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So when you're in the Zen, practice of complete egoless consciousness, and the arrow flies, the I is not involved. The eyes, your actual eyes, the vision, is not involved. Awareness is. The action happens. Your physicality was part of it, but it was not it. You're not it. And you can't talk yourself into it. This is the best phrase that I've heard in a long time. You can't talk yourself into enlightenment. You can't. Because you're already so far out of it by talking to yourself about it.
There's a state of being where when you let go of all that grasping, it's the feeling of spreading out energetically. And once that happens, it is very difficult to have a conversation with someone. And I've said this to you before. I equate it to like a jellyfish state where you're being supported by everything around you, and it's like you don't have that firm structure within in order to interact with this world. You need a framework in order to really interact with this world. And when you release that and you're in this sort of spread mode, perceptions start coming in, and it's a fascinating sensation because things have a texture and a color, and it's almost as if it's what is that called, where your senses overlap.
Gestalt?
No.
Are you talking about synesthesia?
Synesthesia, yeah. It's almost a synesthetic state where a sound actually has a taste.
Yes, exactly.
Or a color can have a smell to it. It's a fascinating thing when you let go, because that's when you begin to realize that you've preset your reception a certain way. And your ego has said it, well, color. Of course, color doesn't have a smell.
Right.
No. It's letting all that go. As I said, it's like you don't have that formal structure.
Well,
and
we do have a formal structure here, though.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I totally agree with you. And the key to take out of this is that to die before you die is to let that part go and let the straws fly and feel it all. But at this moment, we have to go back and say that there is a death to the show and that we've reached it.
We've reached the end of our show, and I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.